Hi, Nicole. It's good to be back with you again for another interview. So thanks for taking the time to be with me. In this one, what I want to talk about is your work as an independent social worker and what's sustained you in that. So we've been working together for over a year now, and I know a fair bit about your background and what you do and so on. But what I'd like to explore in a bit more detail now is what's enabled you to be successful, to sustain your role as an independent social worker and as a mentor to other independent social workers?
I think the key thing in reflecting and looking back, and I think even reflecting and looking at what other independent social workers have done, I know a few that were independent and have gone back to permanent, well, not even agency work, but permanent work. And I think on reflection, I think it's that I've always done things very different. I broke the mold from the get-go. I was never practice in the way where I just went to a local authority and, you know, did assessments for them, or went with an agency who found me work. I didn't just focus on doing assessments or opening a residential centre or tendering. Like, none of that was in my scope. So I was always very, very clear that I wanted a particular vision. I wanted to be doing different things, working with different people. And I think initially I did spread myself a bit too thin and wide, but I found that I had a lot of types of work coming to me. And because I also created, I'm quite a creator. And so I created programs, I created services. I looked at what people needed, whether it was schools, colleges, what did they need? And I pitched to them. And gave them a proposition which they accepted. And I was oftentimes up against other social workers. And so, you know, I would be chosen. And I can remember one school I worked with, they renewed my contract 8 times because what I was offering was just very bespoke. It hit the nail on the head. And I was always finding gaps where they needed more input, and I would offer. And so that's always the way in which I've worked. So I think even now, doing more focusing on mentoring, of moving my mentoring from families and individuals to social workers, that kind of came organically because social workers were coming to me, my colleagues, my friends, and asking me how I was doing it. And I thought, okay, there's a need here. People really need to know this. And so it led me on that journey of engaging more and doing more mentoring of social workers in a paid capacity. And so that, I guess it happened organically. And I think it's what sustained me is knowing what people need. And this is something that I teach on my program when I'm doing one-to-one mentoring, and even when I'm doing consultations, like knowing what your niche is, knowing who you serve. It's a process. I think people don't understand it's a process. You can't have one piece of the process or 1 or 2 pieces, or pick and choose what you want to do and attach it to what you're already doing. You need to go through the entire process and appraise what you're doing. Because you'll find that you'll fall short and there will be gaps in what you offer, and there can't be any gaps. There can't be any gaps in what you offer. It needs to be a holistic service provision that allows people on various stages of the process of transformation that you are providing them, you know. And so I think having a very clear understanding of that from very early on is what has allowed me to remain where I am, and has allowed me to generate 6 figures into my business, even though I didn't even know what a tax return was when I first became independent. You know, so I think that's really been a key, one of the key things. I think the other thing is a willingness to invest. And when I say invest, I'm not just talking about monetary, and I have invested financially heavily, even sometimes when I felt I can't actually afford to do this, but I'm committed to serving, I'm committed to doing the learning that I need to do. So I'd invest even when it wasn't maybe a wise choice to invest at that time, or I should have been using the finances for other things. I saw the benefit of how it's helped me. But I think one of the key things about investment has been investing in my learning, investing in myself, understanding my value as an individual, and that I deserve to learn more. I deserve to grow as an individual, personally and professionally, so that I can enjoy life, so that I can enjoy my career, so that I can have the career that I want. That's ultimately kind of where I started out. Like, I wanted something different for myself. And then I was able to really realize actually having something different for myself would allow me psychologically, emotionally, practically to be available to the people that I want to serve and do what I came into social work to do. So that it kind of fitted together as a puzzle for me. So those are the key things that I would say that's allowed me to sustain my practice.
Yeah, well, and you know, hearing what you've got to say, I'm not surprised you've had so much success. You know, you've clearly got a very focused attitude to these issues, very committed, and that's great. One thing you said that I'm particularly interested in was the thing about not spreading yourself too thinly. I've been independent now for almost 24 years. And during that time, I've had many people send me a copy of their CV saying they would like to be an associate of my company. They'd like to work with me and, you know, with a view to me sort of subcontracting work to them. And most of those CVs have been, frankly, very unhelpful because they've been spreading themselves too thinly. You know, they've basically been saying, I can sing, I can dance, I can tell jokes. It's just like, you know, as if they are the answer to the world's problems because they can more or less do everything. And that goes down very badly because it just basically says that I am so thinly spread out that I've got no real depth, no real expertise in one particular area. And it doesn't have to be one area, it may be expertise in a number of areas, but saying you've got expertise in everything is it just goes against your credibility in a sense. Is that
I absolutely bang on about this. I just had a conversation with a client yesterday about this said thing. And I think some people, it's not until they start the process and the journey will it connect for them. That's what I've come to realize, that they will learn it as they go. They'll realize, because I give the analogy that if you had a knee injury, you can go to and you needed surgery, you can go to a general surgeon or you could go to a knee specialist. Who are you going to want to go to? You're going to want to go to a knee specialist because they're going to know all the nuances of how a knee works, how it's put together, how well it recovers. They're going to have a depth of knowledge that the general surgeon is not going to know. They're just not going to know it. And the reality is, we think that we're losing out, especially when it comes to delivering a service or a product. We think that we're losing out on money by saying, no, we're not going to take that on, when actually we're actually opening the doors for more money to come in and more clients, because people will gravitate to us. And so in terms of having a wide knowledge base, like you said, being able to sing, dance, do gymnastics and everything, you know, that might be great, having surface knowledge of all those things. But when you dive deep in a subject, your knowledge base is very broad. What you get to learn and know about is very broad. So for me, working with social workers and understanding the process of taking them on a journey to independence, I have to learn about all the stages of growing your business from ground zero, not even knowing what independence is. So knowing what they need to learn and how they need to learn it, all the way to hiring their staff. There are a myriad of things in between that. But outside of that, I also have had to learn about mindset. I've had to learn about mindset in different ways, whether that's related to money or belief systems or confidence. There's a myriad of things within that. I'm also thinking about where social workers are right now, still working for a local authority, and what that experience is like, and how can I help them to manage in that process so that they can start thinking about independence. So I have gone so deep, the layers are so deep, and that's why I'm getting people come to me saying, your products really work for me. I'm using the Get Organized secret system and this is working amazing for me.
Yeah. I think that analogy of the needing knee surgery is really captures that. That brings it to life nicely. I should warn you, I'm going to use that in future when I talk to people about these things.
Go for it.
I shall be stealing your analogy there.
Yeah, I love analogies. They just hit the nail on the head every time, right?
Yeah, great. Okay, thanks for that. That's helpful. Another thing I was wondering about is I think something we're both very aware of these days is that workloads have been going up, incidences of burnout have been going up, staff turnover has been increasing. Lots of places now that employ social workers struggling to keep staff numbers up and so on. And if anything, the pandemic has made this worse in a way. Is this something you've been encountering, and how does that relate to independent practice, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would say first and foremost, I really feel it for my colleagues that are on the front line. They are doing amazing work in the height of what is just such an incredibly difficult time that we've ever experienced, in this generation and this decade. And I think they're doing an amazing job. And I think it was last week I spoke to a client and she was crying her eyes out on the call because she's just so deflated, so stressed out with the cases and just doing work. And I think with COVID, it's coming into their home, into their personal space. So now there's nowhere that's safe or sacred to them. And I think, self-care is hugely important right now. And that was part of my 10-day challenge that we looked at just recently. I really feel it for my colleagues at the moment. I think the place for independence is this is the time to start thinking. And it's a double-edged sword because oftentimes social workers are so entrenched in the problem and feeling so stressed that actually they don't have the bandwidth to think about anything else. Anything else that is even going to help them feels like too much work. But then at the same time, like this is the time for you to be reflecting on what on earth is happening for me. And that was one of the leading factors as to why I did the Get Your Mojo Back 10-day challenge. All the replays are there on any of my platforms, so you can go ahead and see it if you're watching this and you're a social worker. But, we went through some of those things. We had those 10 days to do the thinking around what is happening, why is this happening, and start thinking about what can I do different. So that every day of that challenge, there was an action point for them to start changing. And I took part in it myself. And so things like that are hugely important. They need to be taking that time. I think that I really encourage independence. I am a huge advocate for it. I think working in the local authority has a shelf life by virtue of the fact social workers do get burnt out, they get stressed. And I think that they're able to lend themselves to local authorities far better when they're independent. So.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. And I think the thing about self-care is particularly important, isn't it? That's so significant, really, because in social work, we're so used to supporting, protecting and empowering other people that often we don't support, protect and empower ourselves anywhere near enough.
Absolutely.
And that's quite dangerous. Yeah. So thanks for that. That's helpful. Now, another aspect of independent social work that interests me is the sort of the shift of mindset from being a paid employee, where what we offer is for the most part free of charge, that we don't charge people for our services. After a social worker has done a home visit, they don't send an invoice to the family, for example. But of course, when you're independent, it's very different, that we have to make that switch of mindset to charging for our time, charging for our services and so on. How do you think you can help independent social workers make that transition so they think in those terms?
Yeah, and I think this is certainly a problem for social workers that are even semi-independent, because the reality is they're still getting a wage from somewhere. And so they always have that safety net, and they'll kind of teeter into maybe doing a bit of lecturing, maybe doing some report writing, and they're semi-independent and they're quite happy. And again, it's the mindset of that fearfulness of the unknown and the fearfulness of not knowing what to do. And I think the basis of it is the mindset, because I think whatever we see as a value and beneficial to us, we are willing to go out and do the work necessary to acquire it, right? And so I definitely think that sometimes it can be about playing it safe, and there is no room in independence for playing it safe. That there's just no room for that in business, full stop, but especially in this sector, because the reality is when we go out to serve, we are still serving the very vulnerables within our community, and we have to be brave enough to stand, with grounded feet, knowing what we provide, how we provide it, and being able to charge for it, because you will never sustain yourself if you do things for free. And I think, like you said, as social workers, the most we have to do is put in a timesheet if you're an agency worker, right, to get paid. And that's really simple to do. What I see is that social workers aren't even good with taking toil, you know, taking the time owed to them in lieu. They're not good at making sure that they do that. They let that go. And so again, it always comes down to value. How do you value yourself? What boundaries do you have? Because that is what's going to set the precedence of how people treat you. So I've had, when I was providing reports more heavily, I would have solicitors who would be my paying clients. My terms and conditions said they pay me up front. I, for the most part, never had a problem with that because I negotiated how they were able to do that. But there were times where they didn't want to do that. And so I'd actually say, well, I'm sorry, I can't work for you. Can't work to do this piece of work. Whether or not I felt I needed that income, my principle, my boundary was that this is how I work. This is my value. And I found that they always came back. They always came back. And so it's really important that we understand that referring families to organizations where, again, it's free, that's always the mindset. But when you're in business, you have to understand that for longevity and for ensuring that you're covering all your expenses, your profit margin and savings of things that you want to do in the business to serve even more, you have to be charging. And so I do a lot of work around mindset with my clients, and I get them to price their value and know how to get paid their value at that.
I'm happy to say that, because I think that's really important. I think what it's about as well is the level you charge at says something about what you are worth, what value you bring. I've had conversations over the years, for example, with people where I feel they are trying to charge a low price because they think that that will appeal to people, that they are cheap, basically. But I think that word cheap is important because they will come across as cheap. You know, that if what you're charging is less than what other people charge for a similar service, then you're basically saying, I've got no confidence in terms of the value that I bring to you. And linked to that as well, what I've come across is people apologizing for charging and saying things like, oh, I'm very sorry, but I'm going to have to charge you for this. And I think that gives the wrong impression, you know, to say, I'm sorry for charging you. You know, if I was going for a service anywhere else that's not free of charge, you know, I went to a solicitor, for example, a counselor, a psychologist, or a pedicurist or whatever, then I wouldn't expect them to apologize for charging me. I'd expect
they don't apologize. They don't apologize. That's the operative thing. They absolutely do not apologize for it. And I think, you know, what you mentioned there is just so important, Neil, because, you know, we've got to understand that the work that we do is so important. I think it's sometimes more important than some of the other services that are out there. If you think about dentistry, if you think about like cosmetic surgery, there's so many other things that people charge a lot for. They don't apologize for it. And yet I feel our work is far more important. Not that that stuff maybe isn't important to people, but the work that we do is just integral. We are changing the face of communities and the judicial system. We have such a stake in how community functions. So we do need to have an understanding about that. And the last thing I just want to quickly say on that is that it also undermines the profession. It undermines the profession. Like you said, it's not just showing that you're cheap, but you're undermining the profession. So you may be somebody approaching retirement and your outgoings are small. So you can afford to charge £50 an hour, for example, whereas what the rate should be is £150. You undermine the profession when you do that. And so it causes problems within the profession also.
Yeah, very much so. I'm very much in agreement with you. Okay, it's been another interesting discussion. Before we bring it to a close, I wanted to ask you about the challenges of being an independent social worker. Now, I've been independent for, as I mentioned a moment ago, for almost 24 years now. But if I was starting off as an independent now, what sort of challenges do you think I would face?
I think a lot of the challenges right now is knowing what you should be doing and how to do it. I think that's what the biggest challenge that I'm seeing. Social workers, they're just clueless about what independence really is about. You know, what is independence really about? It's not about just going out and doing assessments, and I like doing Form Fs and writing assessments. We've fallen in love with the paperwork. The same things that we moan about and complain about being on the front line, that we're case managers more than working with families, are the things that we're gravitating to in independence. I think other challenges would be like loneliness, knowing how to market yourself in this digital age, understanding that the face of how we interact and do business has changed vastly. Like, business is different to when I was a child. I think my first entrepreneurial spree was when I was like 7 or 8, when I used to do massages for my family at home, and they embellished me, of course, because I was cute and young. But you know, on a serious note, business has changed. Like, the way business is done is very different. You know, I think business can still be very cutthroat, but I think there's more of a lean towards being nurturing in business and understanding that, supporting one another in business. But I think the practical side of knowing how to get clients, how to do things in a very different way, where you're more humanistic and it's not stuffy and professional. Like, we are in a profession which is social work, but we don't need to be like very professional and stiff upper lip. Like, we can be chilled out, we can be ourselves, because people like that. People buy people. And so we need to be personable. We need to understand how to connect. I think gone are the days where business is more about a transaction than it is about connecting with people and understanding that you were there to help them make a transformation in their life, in whatever that may be. Doesn't matter. If I go to the dentist, I want them to transform my teeth. And so they need to take me on a journey that I enjoy. Yeah, for me to go back to them and for me to promote them and recommend them to my friends and family. So it's the same thing in our profession.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Nicole. Very, very helpful, very clear. Anything else you want to add before we bring this to a close?
No, just as always, I think that, you know, if you're really thinking about being independent, I want you to sit and think about what is it that you want from independence, and reach out, connect with the people that can help you. There's no point in keeping people around you that don't get your vision, that are not on the same wavelength as you, and that won't be in support of what you're trying to do. You need people around you that are going to support you, nurture you, and push you to the next level. So yeah, connect with me. I'd love to help. I'm NicoleMLouis across all the social media platforms. You can find me. So I look forward to serving you.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
It's been really good. Thank you. Thank you very much.